Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Barbershop Talk, a talk and a conversation about voting, about what's on the ballot, and what really matters. Tonight we have our men in the Tuskegee community here with us to talk to us about what's on the ballot, about what we need to know as we prepare to vote on November 3rd, and about the importance of voting for us as a community and us as a nation. I am Elise Tolbert, the founder and executive director of Next Step Up, which is a nonprofit in Tuskegee that provides mentoring and tutoring to local high school students. And I'm excited to be here with you all, the viewing audience, and with everybody here today to talk about voting. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our moderator for this conversation tonight, Mr. Nicholas Bentley.
Well, all right. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Well, I'm glad we all here today. It's great that you guys actually came in today. It's actually an important topic we want to talk today. It's about voting. So I just want to get a view of everybody's perspective of how the race is going so far as far as voting. Well, I'm sorry. The question was basically asking how everybody feels about voting as far as polling and mail-in voting. Do you feel as though it's effective, not effective, or which opinion do you have as far as voting for people outside of our viewers?
Particularly exciting this year because of given COVID-19, we've seen an exceptional number of people do early voting, and it really surprised me that many people responded so strong. I think when people got the word, and I think one of the effective things in our community, people passed the word around to other people, and we just came out of municipal election on Councilman Lee. We had a largest number of absentee voting we've ever had, or early voting in this case. And so in the United States, I was told that the numbers are up. Yesterday it said 650, and it's on to 725, 7.25 million number of people voted early.
I think naturally there are definitely some changes this year with the whole process. You know, being in the middle of a pandemic, us facing this coronavirus crisis, it'll be interesting to see what type of impact that it really will have on the outcome of the election. And of course that is something, that issue that voters have been talking about now that it is at the forefront. But certainly, you know, it is good to see that a lot of people are exercising their right to vote early throughout the process. So, you know, we want to continue to see that go on.
Representative Chris England, who's a state legislature, young black representative, said that the early voting numbers in Alabama is an all-time high. It's evidence why Alabama should pass early voting like in other states. And so what we've done, we've given them stronger ammunition to go back in the legislature and get the legislators to vote for early voting, because we have such strong numbers this time. So that's a good sign for us right now in all of our communities.
So what are we doing, I guess, locally in Macon County to ensure people are safe, you know, while they're voting?
One of the main things I've noticed, generally we suggest, we can't require, we suggest, strongly suggest that they wear masks, and we practice social distancing. Probate Judge Cooper, our local probate judge, and all of our election officials who work with it, like Chairman Maxwell and others who've been working with it, the sheriff and everyone, and ensures that we keep, you know, social distancing so that people can feel safe. They sanitize the locations where voting occurs. They use voting barriers, the vinyl voting barriers, just about everything you can do to try to keep it safe. So, you know, if we follow the guideline and keep our distance, I think people are starting to feel safe. But the early voting gave people a chance to go in, so they didn't have to be around many other people.
Well, what about those that are deciding to vote in polls? How would they feel safe with voter suppression that's still going on around nowadays? How would they feel secure that their vote is definitely being counted?
That's measures where we ask people to follow up with the procedures to make sure we understand how the process goes, keep eyes on the voting, and utilize poll watchers. One of of the things that they try to do throughout the United States this year was to have people, especially HBCUs, become poll workers. And college students become poll workers so they can understand the process and become poll watchers. The more you go and see, the more I go and see, the more your friends go and see, the more they can report if it looks like it's out of order. But if we're not there and we're not familiar with the process, a lot of things can happen. So we have more people than ever who've been trained and understand how to look for what's supposed to be right in the voting process. And I'll tell you another thing I saw that was really interesting. On national TV and even locally, I saw a lot of people taking their children in to vote with them, to show them that children who couldn't vote, they would bring them to the polls, even locally here. And that's the best thing you can have happen, because young people then understand at this age what voting is and why it's important and what it looks like. So I think that's one of the best things that's happening right now.
No, it definitely is. I think as though that starting very early will allow everybody to, get a sense of what voting is and why it's important. Unfortunately, I didn't get to vote till now. I missed the election by at least like 20 days. I was unfortunately not 18 at the time to vote, but thank God I'm using my right to vote, and obviously, I'm over here trying to express my young peers, express everybody to go out and vote, use your amendment. This is really important. This is a very, very important election, and I guarantee that we all want the same result. We all want everybody to be on our side, the black community, but it all starts with voting. It all starts with voting. Speaking of voting, not being a resident here in Alabama, I've been here for 4 years, just for Tuskegee. I noticed that there is a little bit of sign that saying there is racism on the ballot. Being someone that's not that is not from Alabama, I do not understand. Can you please explain to me what does that mean? Why is there racism on the ballot? What particularly are you talking about on the ballot?
Well, to answer that question honestly, I think that approach to politics is really not the right approach. Racism is on the ballot, true, but let's be honest. The signs have an image of a Confederate flag and a Trump side. If we're really getting down to it, racism is on both sides of the ballot. Let's be real about it. So we have to acknowledge that fact, I think, first and foremost. Now, I'm not saying, we're saying we should vote for who's the least racist or who's the most, but we have to acknowledge that. And even with this two-party system that we're in, a lot of the policies that are implemented, don't all the time benefit us as black people. So when we say it starts with voting, I think we have to do the same thing that other communities do. I think we need to get together and really identify our issues. And when we go with these candidates and these parties, we have our agenda, and we know that, this is what we're asking for. And in return, we'll give them our vote. And if you look back in history, you can look back at presidential elections, 1964 and on up. And, they've been so close that it always seems like it comes down to the black vote. And, that's a lot of burden on the community for black people to decide these elections. So I think we have to use that power that we have in being that determining factor. A lot of times we are the heart and soul culturally of America. But let's put ourselves at the table in the forefront, politically and everything else, and get done what we need to get done the same way that other groups do. So I think when we do that and we vote, then our vote truly becomes more powerful.
And one thing I want to encourage people is utilize Google. Think about your issues and what you want to see change, and then Google the candidates. Whether it's the current president or the current or the past vice president that's trying to be president, Google, see what they have done, see what they're going to do. Google's a real good tool. Go on Facebook, go on YouTube, listen to the ads, listen to what they're saying. Don't just go off what people tell you. Don't worry about voting straight tickets. Just vote for the person that's going to benefit you, that have you at heart. Most of the time we get caught up in the presidential race, but we need to realize the most important races is going to be your city, state, and county races. Them races is going to impact this community more important than than the presidential race. And more importantly, even at the state level, and with our senators, they're the ones that make the law, not the president. The president got veto power, but if we can put more people in office that look like us and have our views, then we can start to see a shift and a change. So we got to get away from political parties and get towards people who gonna look out for us and our issues.
No, that's definitely on point. I'm sorry. There's another question I want to ask since you just mentioned the Senate. Since you just mentioned the Senate a little bit, we do have Doug Jones running for Senate here in Alabama. Can somebody explain to me why this race is so important for the Senate race right now?
One of the first things you can look at just happened last week. The senators have a lot to do with who becomes Supreme Court justices. And when they have the hearing, that hearing should have never been held under conditions that was held.
At all.
And it was ramrodded through to get that conservative justice on the court. Totally out of order. And you heard the people leading that say no way they should have had it with 9 months ago, so how they gonna do it with less than 2 months ago? That's the most hypocritical thing I've ever seen. And so that's why Senate is so important, because as Sati said, they impact the laws. The laws, for instance, take the number of people who were put in jail because of marijuana charges, a lightweight charge. You had other people put in jail because of crack charges. But you had people on cocaine and other charges, and it affected the other community. They didn't quite get it.
Right.
When you come out with it's a big thing in the community now that they making a big deal of it. They're giving out government money to help those drug addicts on that side. But see, they didn't look at it when it was on the crack side. See, that's what laws do in terms of distributing money. So it's important to look at what those stands are. The Senate race is critical because here's a person, you talk about a race, who stood up in the situation where they got the prosecution for the people who bombed the little black girls in Birmingham, the 4 black girls. That's what he started. So that's what he represents. And you have other people on the other side that represent certain things. So if you go look at their records, like Sati said, you see what's going on. But it's critical in terms of experience. You have another man on the other side who, said he didn't even know what civil rights was about or voting rights laws was about. So you have somebody running for Senate, doesn't even understand what voting rights laws is about. He said he wanted to be on the Banking and Finance Committee. No such thing. How are you going to represent us if you don't even know what you're running for?
Exactly.
So that's why the Senate race is very, very important, because the person's going to be super powerful in that position. You got to know what it's about, and you got to represent the people and have some connection with the people. Do we have a connection with both people? Have we seen both people in our community? Have we seen both people representing us? I don't think so. We know who's been in our community. We know who stood up for our folks. And we know who seems to be fair and speaking to our issues. And so that's what we have to look at. Senate is very, very critical, including the president, though. I would differ with you a little bit on that. The president is super important, but just like the Senate. We don't want to minimize the Senate or the House of Representatives.
No, not at all. I think both roles are important, but I think that it should be emphasized that the Senate does play a huge role, and that we should also take that role more important as well. Another question.
Can I say something about that race?
Go ahead.
I think that this Senate race is important because it really shows kind of a pulse of where we are as a state right now, in more ways than one. Because I think that the way the district is set up, when Doug Jones was elected, it was pretty historic in the sense of him being elected there, defeating Roy Moore, and essentially showing that someone other than a Republican can even win in that district. He is relying a lot on our vote. He's relying on communities like us to pull through for him. And I think it shows that, hey, if this man who may represent, our concerns and come in our community, if he can be elected senator, then, maybe one day somebody from our own community even can step up and be elected. And I think that it's important to keep that pipeline going of communication. But I think this is one of those elections that's going to kind of let us know the pulse of the state. Certainly traditionally, we know as a state as a whole, we've been a red state. And again, not even to get into party politics at all, but I think if you're into the politics, you'll see that this election will kind of show the pulse of where we are as a state.
What's really interesting about that in the Senate race that you mentioned, South Carolina has a chance to possibly elect a black senator, U.S. senator, over Lindsey Graham, who's one of the most powerful conservative senators in the United States. And right now they're running neck and neck.
Right.
He could be elected in a very southern state, just like Alabama. In South Carolina, you could have a young, sharp, black U.S. senator elected over there. Lindsey Graham is sweating it out. He was complaining so much about who's sending him money. Where is he getting all his money? Same place you get your money from. Right. So some folks supporting him this time, they're not supporting you.
Exactly.
And that's the one that flip-flop on his stance. His credibility is falling, and he can't believe it. If somebody else, like you say, we could potentially see a young black U.S. senator from the South. We had one before, but never from the South.
Do you think that's, that means like we're moving forward, like seeing how close that race is, seeing what's happening with Doug Jones, progress in terms of race, or what do you think about that?
The progress, I would say, if I can respond quickly and I'll let somebody else respond. The progress, I would say, just the thought. If we can make that happen, that is huge. Even Doug Jones, like Councilman Lee said, that was huge for him to win. Yeah. Because they got past the racism or the black and the white and said, we want Doug Jones over Roy Moore. Roy Moore's record is so extreme, we're not going to support Roy Moore. Well, if he wins in South Carolina over Lindsey Graham, that is huge for the South, especially South Carolina. And it'll set an example, like you said, for the state of Alabama and for the state of Georgia. And it would encourage more of our folks to get out there, make the connections to win, because he ain't winning and getting all that money from us. He ain't got that kind of money. I mean, not like that. We have it in some pockets, but the kind of money he's getting coming from all kind of folks all over the United States who know how critical that seat is. That's the power of politics. He doesn't have to know them. He represents what they need and what they want.
Right. And I would also say, and I guess to close it off with this subject, dealing with this senator's race. I think in years past, Macon County has always said that we were, 99.9% almost Democrat, close to those numbers. We really were, and I say we, Macon County were a big reason in deciding the factor of why he won that election last time. And I think I say that to say, it's up to all of us, especially up in this forum. We have to hold our senators and representatives accountable and make sure that, we're coming out to vote for you. Well, let's make sure that, you do everything that you can, even in a hostile environment, because we know the political hostility that's going on in Washington right now, Democrats, Republicans, all of that political back and forth that's been going on for years. But, if we're going to show up and support and vote, then we need to make sure that you're fighting for us. And as Mayor Haygood said, you want somebody up there that that's been in your community, and that when something happens, you can pick up the phone and give them a call. So, that's not telling anybody who to vote for, but just, pay attention to those kind of things.
What would you say to somebody that feels kind of disillusioned with voting? They feel like their vote doesn't matter. It's kind of like what you were saying earlier, where the black vote has been so important in this country for years, but we still don't feel like we're being heard. What would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I mean, frankly, a lot of times, as hard as for people to admit it, I can understand a lot of those arguments.
Because I think, feel like, why are they asking us to bail out the country again?
Exactly, and being somebody involved, and Mayor Hagan can attest, in local government, I think we can kind of see it a little bit easier than the perception that from the outside looking in it is. And as Satis mentioned earlier, especially at the local level, I mean, that's where the rubber really meets the road. I mean, the people that you put in those seats, we make the decisions, that affect people's lives on a daily basis. So I would first encourage them probably to, ease into the process, getting involved at that level, certainly. Because I think you can really have an opportunity to see change. You can see your voice being heard and make a difference if you're expressing how you feel about an issue. So I would say, get in, get involved. Now on the national level, again, that is something I think that, the parties, frankly, are going to have to do a better job. And if somebody's feeling like that, especially as a young black person, then for whatever reason they may feel like they've been excluded from the process. And again, I think that we have to do a better job, leaders, to make sure that we're at the table. But we have to make demands as a community. I mean, point blank here, like you said, we have been the deciding factor, probably will be continuous. And I mean, that comes with some power. And, you know, great power comes with great responsibility. And, you know, essentially, you know, we just can't be the you know, it might be controversial, but the field slaves for any party. We just can't do that. And we have to assert that. And I think the more we speak up and are vocal about that, they start to hear us. And it might make people nervous sometimes, but sometimes that's what it causes for, you know, for them to go back to the drawing board and say, you know, hey, that didn't work. Let's try a different approach. Right. Because we're going to have to put things in our agenda that really include these people that we want to come vote for us.
Now, I think one thing that needs to happen, if on a serious note, is it needs to start with the older generation. And I'm speaking from personal, from a personal standpoint. Mm-hmm. When you go to the Democratic conference meetings, when you go to the NAACP meetings, when you go to the New South meetings, when you go to all these different types of meetings, you never see young people there. So it's hard to say you need young people to vote, and we need you to go vote, but you're not bringing them to the table. You're not inviting them to the meetings. You go to the city council meeting, where are the young people? What's bad is you got a Democratic Party conference, local chapter on campus at Tuskegee University. You got one in the city. It should not be two, it should be one. If they got a Democratic club on campus, they should be at the Democratic conference meeting. Right. If it's a Republican conference on campus, they need to be at the Republican conference meeting that's in the city of Tuskegee. You can't have two and separate it. And the only way this city and county is going to grow, you got to start bringing in young people. Because if not, the organizations is ran off dudes. And if you don't have new people coming in, you can't survive. And you can't do certain things in the city that we need to do. So the first thing we need to do, we need to start bringing people into these different organizations. And not just bringing them in, but bringing them in and putting them to work.
I think
and
also
saying that
like
we can use
them too.
Yeah,
like sponsor a young person to join some of these organizations like Friends of the Tuskegee Airmen and all these other organizations. We can reach out and get young people and kind of sponsor them and take them under our wing and kind of show initiative there.
Show initiative, join, make them work.
On the other side, the flip side is young people have to step out. You got to show up. I'm gonna be honest with you. All these organizations around here that we used to have, the reason a lot of them went down, we didn't have enough people followed up from the previous generation. Mm-hmm. See, the way to Tuskegee and what they did for years was called people from the campus at different ages got involved. You go back to, you got Black Lives Matter movement right now. Well, when Samuel Young was killed, students came out from that campus and made stuff happen. The first black sheriff elected in the South, Lucius Samuelson, was elected because black students in Tuskegee got involved in the community. They didn't talk about going and get involved. They got involved. Mm-hmm. Our parents got us out electing people, Otis Pinkett, to the USDA ballot. They had never had a black elected on the county ballot where they passed out the money to the farmers. Because they made us understand, go out there and take these to these farmers so they can understand what's happening. So I agree with you, the organizations have to do that, but a lot of it showing up and getting involved. So a lot of people don't want to take the time. It's not only young people, but it just so happens that some people who've been through some things, they show up because they know what's required. Right. And you need more young people to be willing to show up and be there regularly and be involved and understand. It's not about, and even in the sponsor, I agree, some need to be sponsored, but some need to show up and put their own into it. When folks got involved in Tuskegee, they went and got involved based on what they want to do because they were committed. Is that there's a commitment we have to do. And I think that that's what we have to understand. We have to reach out and make those things open to young people, but young people got to be willing to step up and be consistent, because if not, we don't have the consistency. You look at Lewis Adams. When Tuskegee University was founded, you talk about the power to vote. Tuskegee University was founded because Lewis Adams, instead of taking the money and being selfish, taking the payout and putting it in his pocket and taking care of his family, he said, I want you to give me the money to start a school. Now, why did they give him the money? Because they needed the black vote. They boiled down and need the black vote, which Councilman Lee said, the black vote has always been pivotal. pivotal, but we haven't always used it that way. But they needed the black vote so bad. He said, yeah, I'll give you the money, I'll help you get the land, I'll pass the bill. He told them exactly what he wanted, he knew what he wanted, but it was for the collective of people. It wasn't for individuals. So many times we have folks go out to represent us, they represent themselves and their few friends, not for the collect of the community. And that's what we got to do. But we got to have more people show up, because see, change is not an immediate process. And we got folks want to come and immediately jump up into something. Don't want to take time to learn, don't want to be there and come back. It's a headache. I can tell you about government and politics. It's slow. It's a slow dragging process. And a lot of times we don't want to go through what it takes to get there. But the progress that we've made has been monumental over a long period of time. When they had Gomillion versus Lightfoot in that case, that was people off the campus, Dr. Gomillion, people in the community that got together, made that case happen. They saved money to make that case happen. They put their money together. When we come up to today, we've got to pull people together to make things happen. We put it together, we can make it happen. But we got to engage each other, and that's what you're talking about, engagement. We got to be open to it. We also have to have people willing to come and be consistent. Can't come and leave.
I think with that too, like for me, because I went to high school in Tuskegee. I actually dropped out of high school in Tuskegee at the age of 16, and it took people like yourself, really pushing me and really explaining to me and being hard on me and telling me and holding me accountable for me to really get it. And so I don't think sometimes it's that the young people aren't interested. A lot of them just need to be pushed. And sometimes, honestly, I have people come to my house, drag me out of bed half the time, or take me from where I was doing something bad and pulling me out of those situations and putting me into something positive. And so, I think, and I'm not saying it's like all on your generation or it's all on somebody or whoever, but as older people in the community, we do have to take initiative to go out into the community and grab these young people and pull them out of those situations. Because if you don't see better, you're not gonna do better. And so we've done a good job of that, in Tuskegee. I think in all communities all over the country, we could do better at getting more young people involved. But I like what I'm saying with the Black Lives Matter movement, with a lot of young people getting out, protesting, getting involved. And we have an opportunity here, and we have a real chance to build new leaders and to do exactly what you're talking about. But that window of time is closing. And so we need to take advantage of this moment right now to get more young people involved.
I think it comes down to just ownership in general as well. We have to own our issues. We have to own our vote. We have to control the narrative as Black people. And I think when we do that, we can kind of change the approach of how we reach to young people in the next generation. I think for so long, in the two-party political system, the Black vote has kind of been, emotions have been really used to draw the vote in. They make it a very emotional thing where it's not necessarily a policy thing. A lot of times things get dumbed down for us. Right. And I think that approach is outdated, frankly, now. I think that, young people are at a point now where we can stand up, where we can understand what's going on, and we can see through a lot of the...
also research.
Yeah, and research. I mean, we can see through kind of a lot of the old school, fish fry, church. I mean, not saying anything wrong with that, but that can't just be it, we can't, and that can't be the mentality. And again, that's not one party, but that's anybody. We have to own our vote. And I think then when we do that, people will really feel empowered with their vote. And we have to just own our own issues in general. I heard you mention the Black Lives Matter movement and everything going on. And, a lot of times people take advantage of our issues and they really come in and capitalize. And we end up getting the short end of the stick and fighting other people's battles. I think when we can really own our issues, identify them for ourselves, I think more people naturally are going to want to be involved in the process because they feel like they're really fighting for something and they're not fighting, somebody else's battles. So just being inclusive and open to new ideas and innovation for sure.
I have a question. We do have an intergenerational panel in a sense, And what we've seen, even particularly, during the primary elections, is that there are different issues that matter to different generations of Black people. One of the narratives that has really been pushed and come to the forefront is that we're not a monolithic. We're not Black person. We're Black people. We are from different geographies. We're from different generations, and we have different issues that we care about. So I'm wondering, for you all, and maybe as you all connect with the people who are a part of the audience, what are some issues that you think that are issues that are forefront for younger voters and or for older voters, and where do you see the connection between those two?
Something, you can criticize like Black Lives Matter movement, but at least they're coming up with new ideas. And, I think a lot of that should be on the table. I don't think it's wrong to question these kind of old ideas that we've had in the past and try to come up with new progressive ideas. So I do like the idea of reallocating resources into our community. That's not necessarily meaning we got to defund the police and do all that all the time, but I don't think that should be off the table. I think it's okay to question everything that's come before and come up with new ideas. I don't think anything's sacred when it comes to politics. I think it's okay to question everything. So, I like ideas like that. I like, even if it's something like the Green New Deal or, just throw new ideas out there and question everything. I don't like just falling in line and believing, oh, well, this is what was done before and this is a new idea, so I'm just going to shoot it down. I really like to look into new ideas. I'm not just going to say it's stupid just because it's a new idea. Right. I want to look into it for myself, be it the Green New Deal, be it reallocating resources, whatever it is. I just like new ideas, so that's just me.
I think the justice part has to be something we got to consider. Too many of our African American men in particular, and even women now, that are taken advantage of in the justice system. And all we have to do is get our folks together in elected leadership to have an impact. We have Black Lives Matter, get them to put together an impact statement regarding justice and our rules and regulations and guidelines. I give you an example. I watched the other day of an adjacent community where I was coming out of there. This policeman was sitting along the line. He was beyond the city limits, and he wasn't supposed to be in the police jurisdiction getting people coming into our county, and yet he did that. And he came up on me, and I thought he was going to stop me. I said, you must be crazy, because I wasn't speeding, because I had seen him way before I got there. But he put up on the side of me, and I didn't have on I had on a white shirt, but it was a casual shirt, and didn't have on a tie. So he pulled on around and went up and got a younger Black guy. I was racing back to me, because otherwise I'd have gone and asked him something, but I've seen that several times. We've got to get justice issues, because see, when you get that on your record, the biggest thing we face in this country is how many of our people who've been through the justice system and have something on their record which affects your employability, your ability to borrow, your ability to go into business. That impacts your whole life negatively, and then your family. So we got to do something about justice. And that means demanding that the people we elect in office, whether it be senators, the president, state representatives, we need them doing something about the justice issues instead of just talking about it. They can be revised. The reason they got there was because that's how they voted to put them in. They can vote to change them. Other crazy things going on, like example I heard today, they're allowing people to go into voting places with guns. You've had a candidate suggest people go intimidate people. How you gonna allow somebody to come in the voting place with a gun? Right. That's voter intimidation. Nowhere it should be legal. So every elected official should be fighting against that. If you come in here with a gun, I'm gonna go get mine. And then what you gonna have? You wanna get the Wild Wild West? Well, that's what you're gonna end up with. Right. And you have a lot more violence. Right. That's civility and sense. And protection of the vote is one of the primary fundamentals we should have. It shouldn't even be questioned. And so those are some of the things that we need to look at, justice issues that we can impact. And that would cut down on so many of our people having these negative impacts on their record for things that most of them probably shouldn't have having to go to jail for in the first place.
So you guys you guys actually support the Justice and Policing Act that is being presented while in the presidential race.
Which police that?
Sorry, the police, I'm sorry. It is the Justice and Policing Act.
I would definitely support some revision of the Justice Act. I'd have to see the whole thing to understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to do a little more research on it, but I mean, I like questioning everything, and I think, you know, if it's putting resources into the hands of people like, you know, my cousins, my brothers, my sisters, that, you know, that need it, you know, I'm all for it. So, be it expanding, you know, Medicare or having a public option so they can have help with mental health issues. Because a lot of times, you know, at least in my experience, what I found is the people around me who use drugs or have issues, a lot of that is, it's a mental health issue. You know, those aren't criminals. You know, the people that I know in my life, they're not criminals. These are people that need help and they're self-medicating. And so we got to find a way to do better, you know, with that. We do a good job, you know, locally trying to reach out, and I think Tuskegee is a real leader in a lot of areas, but, you know, obviously around the country we can do better, you know, with how we treat these people. So that's just me.
You know, on that was what I was referring to earlier. An example of that in terms of justice is opioids is what I was talking about. When opioids came in, all of a sudden they could get this money and they decriminalized opioids. You don't put anybody in jail about it. You try to give money and help them out. They didn't do that with crack and other things that affected our community. So they gave a whole thing on opioids when I was first elected. So I was in front of the league. So when we had this session, I asked them, I said, well, state health director was there. I said, well, what about crack? I said, you got all this money you all have committed and the governor's committed for opioids. What about the things that affect our community? How all of a sudden is it that opioids are decriminalized regardless of what they do, and you want to give money to help them out? Why didn't you do something in our community? And he said, well, that's right. He said, you're exactly right. And he said, I must admit, we didn't do that. He said, I have to go back to the governor and see if I can get her. But see, the problem is, if our legislators can vote for the opioids, why couldn't we get our folks up to raise enough saying to vote for help in our community, like you said? Because it's the same thing. If it's opioids got mental health issues, crack folk got mental health issues. It all depends on how you list it in terms of our justice system. So that's a perfect example to me.
And that's another reason why it's very important to know who's on the ballot and know what they stand for.
Yeah.
Because if not, the same type of people gonna get back in office, and we're gonna end up with the same result. So sometimes change is for the good. Sometimes we need to keep certain people in office, and then we need to add to it. And by adding to it, we can get certain things changed. But call your legislature, call them, text them, hit them on Facebook, hit them everywhere you can. Tell them your issues, tell them your concerns. And if they're not listening, go to the ballot, vote them out. Tell your peers, vote them out.
I think something else too with the on the criminal justice front that's been used to suppress the black vote, you know, is that system, you know, to put, you know, young black people in a situation where they can't not only not get jobs, but where they can't vote anymore.
Right.
And so, you know, I you know, definitely support, you know, any kind of reforms to something like that, where people who have served their time and done their, done their time and been reformed, they should have every right to vote and do all kinds of stuff. So, because I mean, that's what prison is for. You're supposed to serve your time, and you know, there's not supposed to be cruel and unusual punishment. I remember hearing something about that in civics class. So, you know, why are we continuing to punish these people after they've done their debt to society?
Constitution. Cruel and unusual punishment. That's part of the Constitution. That's not supposed to be there. That's one of the main things that we have to battle. But you talk about prison, that's another example. We need to be pushing people to make changes in the prison system. I was very, very disappointed, and all that we could do in Alabama is talk about building these mega prisons, which we're getting ready to do, and giving it to private people who, private contract, they're not even bidding the contract. I mean, some of the stuff we can't do at the city, anything on $15,000 we bid, they got a multi-million-dollar contract, and they don't have to bid it to build a prison. Not rehab, like you say, where we put our resources. We could have put those resources into helping people, revise some of our criminal codes so that we don't not over penalizing people. Some of those people won't be in there that long, and put them into something to help them out. But yet here we want to build mega prisons where folks will make money on it, and that's what it's about. Not trying to help the people who need the help. So that's where we need people really addressing those issues. But you say, Satis, look behind what their stand is. How do you stand on this? Nobody talks about the prison issue. Who voted for the prisons? Who raised sand in the state of Alabama about these mega prisons? You heard a little bit of titty chatter. You didn't hear enough. And that's disappointing. The prisons and the mental health issue is ridiculous in the state of Alabama.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. You know, we have to focus on prison reform for sure. I think Ava DuVernay's documentary 13th kind of opened a lot of people's eyes of some of the things that are going on in the prison system. But we're living in a state where, I mean, we're in the thick of it. You know, look at our former Senator and former Attorney General Jeff Sessions. When you think of some of the things that he's done that have put so many people behind bars. And as Mayor Haygood was saying, when it comes to these prisons, these mega prisons, a lot of times all you have to do is just follow the money. And you can really see exactly what the motivation is to keep locking black people up in prison. And there's been such a problem. The conditions have been, I mean, deplorable. I mean, inhumane-like conditions in prison. And no matter how you feel about prisons, rehabilitation, punishment, whether you feel like it should be a combination of both, I think every human being, you know, deserves to be treated like a human being for sure. I think that is something that, you know, we could agree on. And, you know, we look at this prison issue. I think that's something that is breaking our families apart, and it has been for years. So we certainly want to see that issue dealt with a little bit better. And that's an issue that I think people don't really pay attention to it because they're just saying, oh, well, you might know somebody in prison, but they just might be locked away and forgotten about. But let's definitely make that an issue and focus on rehabilitation with our prison system.
The guy was saying the other day was interesting. Middle-aged guy. He said, well, you know, this guy, he had a little problem. He said, I got a relative and, you know, he in prison. You name me, you know, almost any black family doesn't have a relative in prison or was in prison. That's a stark reality. When you start talking to folks, you're going to find out there was a relative somewhere close by, or at least a close cousin. Somebody's been through that system. And that's a shame that it's so dominant in our culture, but it's by design. And that's what we got to change. We got to have prison reform and change the whole justice system to make it a real justice system.
Yeah, I think get rid of that narrative like, you know, we commit more crime. We're also a lot of the exonerees. You know, we also are a lot of the people that are convicted innocently.
Right.
And so I think just, like you said, changing that narrative is so important because, you know, some people would say, well, it's because they commit more crime. It's really not that. It's by design. A lot of it goes back to wanting free labor, you know, or just cheaper labor, you know, with these private prison systems that you talk about. And so I definitely want to see something done about that, you know, because, yeah, that's just wrong.
And a lot of citizens don't know that one of these planned mega prisons will actually be built right down the road, exit 26, the Tallahassee exit. So, you know, it certainly will have an economic impact on the area, having that new facility there with the jobs and everything like that. But it's just that much closer in our backyard. And so we have to keep an eye on it. When I say keep an eye on it, literally, but also, you know, making sure, holding our policymakers accountable for what's going on there and making sure it's not a profit-driven institution, which we know, you know, essentially that's what's going on. But that's what we are up against. So I just think it's important to know that's going on right in our own backyard.
Thank you for saying that.
One of the critical issues I think is we've got to really, really get in the hand and understand how serious it is with healthcare. Our failure to demand healthcare as a right is absurd. You look at any other civilized country, Western countries and what they call progressive countries, healthcare is not an option, it's a given. It's understood and it's expected. When we don't expect much, we don't get much. And that's what we gotta change. And that's what voting does. It helps you to get in a position to expect more. What they respond to is the power of the vote. Those senators, state representatives, Congress people at all levels respond to the power of the vote. With the power of the vote, like Councilman Lee said, we have to expect more from it and demand more from it. And that's what we're not pressing hard enough. They give us excuses. If they can do this in other countries, why can't we have it? It's crazy not to have health care here in this country. Because see, if we don't have it, and if we lose it, look at the condition it puts all these families that will be in. I mean, it impacts families in a harsh way. People lose property they've tried to have all their life. People lose houses. Because you put somebody in a nursing home, watch what happens. That's why we got a lot of houses in this community. They are people who went to nursing home, and the nursing home took over the property. So if you own something, you got to give it to them because we don't have the kind of health care that should be taking care of our folks in our community or in the United States. So that's a critical issue. Oh yeah, a lot of these houses around here, you go look them up, the nursing home own them, and they won't even keep them up. And as soon as the system turn around, we be going at them. We already called some of the lawyers or something, and they cussed one lady out in this community when she called and said, why don't y'all cut the grass for that? You need to mind your own business with a D in there, your own D business. And she was just trying to get them to come cut the property when she looked and saw who owned it. A lot of property is owned by people outside in nursing homes or attorneys. And that's why. People went into health care, they couldn't pay the hospital bill, or they couldn't pay the nursing home bill, so the family loses their property. And it's unfortunate, very smart families, they teach, if you think you're getting to a certain age, put the property out of your name, put it in your children's name or somebody else's name. I mean, you really have to teach folks to do that. See, the other folks do it. We're just not learning to do that. My parents did. I can respect my dad for that. Before he got to a certain position, he said, I'm gonna put the property in your name. You put the house, transferred over to me. I took over the house, paid the notes on everything. Took our property, me and my sisters. I mean, he recognized that. There are other people who are doing that, but it's because if you get in a condition, have a major medical bill, they come get everything you got. So all that your family has built over years, you lose it just like that. And that's a ridiculous system.
I have a question too, like in regard to like property. I seen on the ballot they have the new amendment for the special tax, and I know we have two of our leaders here in the community. So can you explain to people what that amendment is for the special tax amendment 420, and like how will that be used to help and benefit the community here?
Tax in Macon County, is that the education tax?
Yeah, Amendment 420.
Yeah. That's a tax that we do so many meals to provide education, and you have to tax in order to support education. That's a continuation of the tax we already have. It's nothing new.
Yeah, it's just a renewal.
It has to be renewed. Otherwise, we won't have enough money for education. And education is a pathetically low level tax-wise in our state. Even in our community, that little money is nothing. I was shocked to hear somebody, and I thought it was a black person on channel radio this morning in Montgomery speaking against the tax of schools in Montgomery. Montgomery has some of the lowest property tax of any county in the state. That's why they can't compete against Auburn City Schools or the Pike Road City Schools or nowhere else because they don't have enough revenue. If you're gonna be credible, you have to have a base. And then when you ask about how much does it add to somebody's tax bill, they're talking about $75 to $150 a year for the average person to help support a school system. That's absurd. I mean, if you're gonna have a decent school system, we should be willing to do that. But you have people who are complaining against it, then they go blow $150 at the casino this weekend, and then the next weekend, and then the next weekend. So you can't for one time or the whole year pay an extra $150 to have a decent school system. If you care about your children or your community, that's the reality. We have to face the reality. So what ours is though here locally is just a continuation. There's no new taxes for us. Montgomery would have new taxes, but Montgomery needs new taxes. They don't have any money for their school system. That's the state capital, one of the third largest cities in the state. And they got the lowest tax in the state of Alabama, which is sort of the lowest tax in the nation. What's that? Why? Because they're supporting private school system, and a lot of our private school system money comes from our taxes. So they passed a law to allow them to take private money to give it to private schools to get a tax break. That was crazy.
That's the school voucher.
But see, that's why it's important to vote, because you should never have people supporting that for the purpose of private schools. That's why the private school system is so strong in the state of Alabama.
And the people who are pushing for these in large amount, their kids aren't in public schools.
No,
So they feel that we're paying these taxes to support, you know, the educated group of people that we really don't care anything about. That's just the point blank, here, the raw of how it goes down. A lot of people don't really understand the connection between the property tax and the educational system and the inequities in the educational system. They'll look at the school system, you know, a place like Macon County, and compare it to Mountain Brook, and not realize that the money is directly coming from property taxes. So you can look at the per value of those houses, see how much they're paying, and literally see how much, you know, per household is going towards that school system. And, you know, I think when you look at it like that, yes, it's important. We can talk about raising property taxes, but let's get to the root of the issue. Let's get to the empowerment. Let's get to the point where we can build a community where we're building these homes that are, you know, we have a community that are comprised of people, you know, who have a strong economic base. And I think once we do that, we get back to the kind of old ways that this community was when we did have a strong black economic base. We had people working from the university. We had the VA hospital. We had, you know, other hospitals functioning and open. This created a kind of tax base in the community that, sure, it improved the schools by the tax revenue and the property taxes, but also it was just that empowerment and that spirit that was in the community. So it all ties together. So I think that is very important that we support our schools and know that connection with the property taxes and the quality and conditions of the schools in our state.
So I know when I see that.
Oh yes.
I'm alright. Well, this has been a really dynamic discussion, not just about voting and the importance of voting, but also about the issues related to voting, about what issues are on the ballot, and about how we pursue those issues, both as we consider who and how we're voting, but also as we think about how we want to push forward to pursue our agenda going forward. We have a few questions from the chat and from the audience, so I want to take some of those questions and then we'll wrap it up. Our first question comes from, let's see, I have on my phone. Our first question comes from Al Mitchell, and Al Mitchell's question is about youth getting involved in the political process. Al says that Judge Cooper has several 11th and 12th grade students from Notasulga and BTW High School. They'll be working as student poll workers in this upcoming election, and you know, applauds that effort and says that what can, you know, when many may see this as boring and run with social media and stereotypes, what other ways can we motivate more youth and young people to become involved in the process? And I am a poll worker. I just left a poll worker training before coming here. And we had a number of teenagers, high school students who were there at the training, literally getting trained to get involved. So I know that this was not haphazard. This wasn't because we said, okay, we need poll workers and, you know, they just happened to come. But this was that they created an intentional program to get high school students there. And now high school students are getting experience in a process that they had never had experience in before. So I think, you know, that's one really cool way is to be intentional about literally reaching out to people and like literally saying, hey, here's the avenue for getting involved. And they seem really excited to do this, really excited to be involved. Does anyone else have anything on that topic?
I think just education and then going earlier, being honest about voter education and really empowering the youth and making them feel a part of the process, not making it feel like the voting is just something that you're just supposed to do and vote for people because your mama did it, your daddy did it. You know, you can vote for the same people your mama and daddy did, but be educated when you do it. And I think that that's important. When we talk about, you know, our condition of a people, I think that goes a lot into our vote being, you know, counted and really being taken serious. is when we take ourselves serious, we take our issues serious, and we empower and we become an educated voting bloc. I think when we understand politics as a science and exactly how it works, especially at the national level, I think that will help our community out a lot. You know, politics is about quid pro quo. You know, what can you do for me and what can I do for you, basically, for lack of better words. And that's something that, you know, is a part of politics. And I would like to leave everybody, if you all have not read the book Powernomics by Dr. Claude Anderson. That's a very good book that kind of shows the connection of economics and the dollar, and how it ties over to politics, and how, you know, other communities, you know, gain their political capital and power really by using that approach. So I think that other groups are doing the same thing. We're waking up. You can say what you want about these past 4 years, you know, under President Trump, and it's been a roller coaster. But if there is one good thing that comes out, is more young people are waking up, and we're starting to realize that, hey man, this whole system is messed up. And you know, if there's, Frederick Douglass said, without struggle there is no progress. So certainly we're seeing some struggle right now. So I'm looking forward to, you know, seeing the progress come next.
I think some, you know, too, you know, that Chris was saying is, you know, maybe having like this, you know, we have Booker T. Washington, but having that student body government actually, you know, bring forth policies and go through the political process and bring them to the mayor in order to, you know, pass their own policies, be it with recreation or whatever. And so maybe making that student body government at our local high school level, you know, elevating that and making it more important, and, you know, giving them a seat at the table. And I've heard Chris and the mayor talk about getting young people involved that way, you know, just elevating, you know, the level of that student body government to where they pass their own policies. So I think that's one way to get young people involved is, you know, I know for me, if I'm passing policies about, okay, I want this park renovated or something, I would be very, you know, motivated. And like Chris is saying, the young people I talk to are excited about politics. They are excited to be involved in the process, and we are seeing people wake up. So I think that's really cool.
I have another question from the audience. The next question comes from Gregory Bernard, and the question is about the Electoral College. So, you know, the Electoral College is nebulous to a lot of people, especially when you, in an election like the last, in an election like the last election where one candidate won the popular vote and yet another candidate won the presidency. So, could you all kind of like break down, I guess, you know, a 101 or a short snippet of what the Electoral College is and what role the popular vote plays in the candidacy of a president?
You can't do that in a short period of time.
It's hard, yeah.
It's a representative structure, and I must admit the last time I went in depth into it when I was taking constitutional law in school, it's a representation of calculation where so many states have so many votes in the Electoral College, and you have to have 207, I believe, is the number to be elected president. And so, based on the state size and influence, so many votes were assigned to different states. So regardless of the numbers you have, it's based on the number of votes to that state. So you have to pitch to a state that has a large number like California, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, Florida, Texas. That's why you see them going to those states, because they have so many electoral college numbers assigned to them from a tradition, and it hasn't been changed. Is it fair, and does it make sense? It's supposed to make sense, but I never understood it, and I was in a serious course on it, but that wasn't my concentration. So I admittedly, because it didn't make sense to me, I didn't stay with it. I understand it, and I respect it, and I understand that you have to target certain areas just like in anything else. If you're in a game, you have to understand that game. In that political structure, you have to understand where to go to get the largest number of votes. That's why you see them going to certain states. That's why Pennsylvania, they ruled Pennsylvania out. Both presidential candidates. Yeah. Ohio, California, because they had the most most votes. Somehow it should be more aligned to the total number of votes, but it's not. And I don't know if they'll ever change that weighting. I'd have to go back and study more to explain, but it takes some time to look at it and try to explain it.
Yeah, if I remember right, it was a system put in place to make sure that, larger populated states wouldn't have, I guess, more influence over smaller populated states like Alabama, places like that, Florida, And so it was supposed to make the system more fair back then, especially for farming communities. So like people, in New York wouldn't have more influence politically than somebody say in Iowa. So it was supposed to make the system more fair. Now, is it fair? I can't really say.
I don't think so.
Nah.
I can honestly say that I think the electoral college system is one of the main reasons of why people and young people feel like their vote really don't count, to be honest, because you can have a candidate who wins a state, wins the popular vote in that state by one vote, and all the electoral delegates will go to that candidate and to that party. So everybody who came and showed up, they really feel like my vote didn't make a difference, because if I would have stayed at home, the same thing would happen. And those kind of narratives get going, they go on because of that system. So I think it's one of the leading causes of that, to be honest with you, because they feel like it's in somebody else's hand. And because it is so confusing, we might have a better understanding than most people does, and it's still confusing. But I think that it kind of disenfranchises people to a certain extent.
I felt that way too, because if I go out here and vote, is it gonna matter in a place like Alabama?
Right, and I was gonna say they take it for granted that because this is a red state, it's gonna forever be a red state.
Home.
Might as well stay home.
But you shouldn't.
You shouldn't. But I think the electoral college is one of the leaders of that.
Big obstacle.
I think we gotta build the trust between the politicians and the community up again, because like he was saying, a lot of young people are lazy, so you gotta kind of put them out. Like this meeting we're having now, we need to kind of take it to the high school, get them involved, or take it to the college one day and get them involved. But the trust level is definitely down in the community for the politicians and the people in the community. So we got to find a way to make people trust the politicians again, so they will be able to make out and vote, and they will feel comfortable with going out and vote because they trust the people that they're voting for. That's true.
We also say don't let that be a deciding factor whether you're going to vote or not, because you still got other people on the ballot that are very crucial, such as your state senators, your state representatives. They are very crucial. So outside of worrying about the electoral colleges, we got other people that's on the ballot. You got school board statewide that's on the ballot.
Judges.
You got judges on the ballot. You got DAs on the ballot. So you got outside of you saying I don't want to vote because of electoral colleges. Think about the other positions that are on the ballot that, to me, is very crucial.
Yeah, I think we got to find a way. A lot of people don't understand the ballots and what's going on too. So we need to find a way to get these people educated on what's going on with the ballots and how to go to vote and exactly what they're supposed to do. A lot of people don't understand the electoral votes and none of that. So we need to find a way to educate people on this.
And I think to your point, it's starting, at events like this tonight. I want to thank you for letting us be here tonight.
Yeah.
Because this is really what it's all about. We can get excited about the conversation. I've said this before, that are happening at the council meeting and other young people showing up and things like that. But I'm even more excited about these type of conversations because it just lets me know that more people are starting to, tune in to what's really going on. And there are more people out there watching as well that wouldn't normally on a Wednesday evening, they might not even be thinking about any of this kind of stuff. So, definitely.
Well, here's my last question from you all. This question comes from Fred Gray Jr. He gives a good preface to the question, but I'll just ask it straight up. We have a few days left. Tomorrow is the last day for early voting, and then the election is just our big election is voting day is in a few days. In two sentences, what will you do to make sure that the people get out to vote for this election? We'll start with Chris.
What will I do to make sure the people that I know get out to vote for this election? I think word of mouth is one of the best things that we can do, and also leading by example, I think, as well. You know, we can disagree on ideologies and theories and this and that, but at the end of the day, you know, we're not telling you who to vote for. We're just telling you to show up and to go vote. You have to do your research. You have to be educated. But I think if each one of us, you know, just personally, you know, lead by example, let everybody know, you know, kind of how you stand. I think that's the best way.
Yeah, I think this one is specifically for the young people. You know, you can register to vote, you know, online a lot of times. And so something that I did was I helped a lot of the older people in my life who weren't as tech savvy, you know, register to vote. And then also helping them to understand, you know, their options with mail-in ballots or, you know, be it early voting. I know some of the elderly people in my life, they voted early to avoid the crowds. And so encouraging, you know, the young people, encouraging the older people to actually get out and vote.
I think everybody needs to do their part as far as I can't touch everybody, but I can touch everybody that in this barbershop. And I can encourage everybody that comes across me to vote. I think that we need to actually provide a transportation system. I know there's a lot of people in Tuskegee that can't actually get to the polls, and that's what's stopping a lot of votes. So we had one or two buses that can go around and pick up and drop off. I think that would help the actual voting numbers in Tuskegee, Alabama. So.
And I do know those resources are available. I don't know the phone number off the top of my head, but if somebody's watching, they can put it in the comments section. Maybe Attorney Gray, because I did hear you say that there will be rides provided to the citizens. So we want to make sure that the citizens know about those type of resources that are out there. Also, just to avoid some confusion, we just had our city municipal election, which everybody came to the municipal complex to vote. For this election, you will vote at your designated polling place. So that may or may not be the municipal complex. You might have to go to Cecia, Sojourner. You might have to go to the Armory. Are they back at the Armory or is it the airport? So Armory, and through other polling places throughout the county. So I think that just, especially with young people, first-time voters, that's always a confusing factor for both elections. So we have to do the best that we can to let people know. So you know that's going right now. So hopefully somebody put that phone number in the chat so we can get that out there as well to let people know the number that if people need a ride that they can call.
No, I mean, being on the youngest on the board, how I push everybody to vote is really just use my platform. Being used social media to expand and to see ideas for people to let them know that, you know, this is important. This is an election for our lives, specifically my generation, you know, that we don't understand that this is something that can change our entire lives for the rest of our lives. You know, and we need to go ahead and go out and go vote.
Well, I'm gonna continue to do like I've been doing. Prior, I've been doing voter registration drive. I partnered with the newly elect councilwoman, Norma Jackson, to get people registered to vote. I done took voter registration form to my job where I work in Auburn. Even though they don't live in Macon County, they still stay within the district, so we still need to get them registered. One thing that I'm gonna do, and folks who follow me know, I'm going live on election day. I always go live. So when you see me go vote, you see me going live, you need to be right behind me. Go vote, whether you live in Macon County or not. You might be in Auburn, Montgomery County, still go vote.
The main thing I do is follow up, like you said, make sure we have transportation and get with Attorney Gray and others and talk to everybody I can touch, the same as you said. Everybody that I see, I'm going to try to remind them and encourage them to vote. And I remind them, think about how difficult the last 4 years have been, how far backwards we went, how crazy it got. If you think that was crazy, we cannot afford to do this for 4 more years. We cannot go that much further back for 4 more years. It's too much, it's too serious not to vote. And I'm gonna remind a lot of people. So I'm not gonna tell you how to vote, but I'm gonna suggest some things and we can talk about it. But just think about how bad it's been the last 4 years. Do you imagine how much worse it could be if we go through that, if you double that? We can't afford that.
Oh yeah, and I know a lot of people say, is it gonna matter if I do vote? But look, you gotta look at what's gonna happen if you don't go vote. You know what I'm saying? Get a lot of work, so that's all I got to say.
That's how we got here.
Yes,
A lot of folks didn't vote last time. A lot of folks didn't vote last time. Now we got what you get when you don't vote. If you think you like what we had the last 4 years, you should be running to the polls if you don't like it.
Sprinting.
And running, screaming, and carrying somebody with you on your back, in the car, any way you get there. We gotta go vote.
And typically speaking, the higher the number of voters kind of favors the Democratic Party, the lower the number of voters, you kind of tilt towards the Republican Party. So you got certain candidates you like, you want to get them in there, just to show you how the scale is tilted. And so if you want to see change, you need to get out and vote. And if we don't get enough people out to vote, we won't see change. And so, like Chris Lee said, you can lose by 1 vote, and we don't want that to happen. At least I don't. And I'm hoping everybody else follow suit, follow the line. Don't meet me at the poll. Beat me at the poll.
One vote, one state for the electoral college.
Well, I want to thank you all for this dynamic discussion. I think this conversation was really rich. We talked about a lot of topics. We got to hit on some issues like criminal justice. We talked about the Green New Deal a little bit. Climate change is something I know is important to young voters too. We talked about education, which is really important. And like our panel said earlier, our candidates who are on the ballot have stances on these. And we need candidates who are our representation, because that's what these people are. They're representatives. And so they make decisions on behalf of the masses. And it's your job to make sure that you choose these people and that you continue to work with these people. So I want to thank all of you all for your participation in this conversation. It was really good. And our next step is to vote. All we got to do is get out there and vote. That's the next step. Sprint to vote, yeah. So thank you all for joining us today. You can find out more from our panelists about voting. We'll continue to